So after almost 3 months, I finally took another DMT trip, and I was basically taking a break for a while because I was going through a lot of emotional trauma, and I didn't really want to try to deal with it with a psychedelic experience or try to make it or risk making it worse at least. But I got to the point where on Saturday I couldn't really take it anymore in terms of me just trying to handle it on my own. I needed to kind of roll the dice on something and hope that whatever I experienced might kind of shift my perspective a little bit, because I've just been kind of feeling like I've been barely floating above water, kind of. I've just been really struggling with what I've been dealing with lately, and I know I really shouldn't be struggling this long, but for me it takes me a while for myself to move through certain things that happen in my life. And I wish I was easier to I was someone who could easily get over things and look on the bright side of some certain instances or circumstances. But for me, I really find it hard to not fixate on certain things that happen to me. And at this point, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I wanted to do something that I hoped would kind of shift me out of this funk that I'm in. So I pretty much this time I used DMT pretty much as some sort of like bullet to just like shoot myself in the head. It was kind of some sort of suicidal act, but not really literal, but more of a metaphysical or a metaphor kind of way. And the reason why I see it that way is because DMT usually scares me a lot, and for me to do it, it has to be something that is very serious in my eyes. And just because the experience has been getting very intense for me, and every time I do it, I always feel like I'm dying. So I realized that, this is what I feel like I wanted to do, so I might as well just go through with it. And usually I smoke probably around 20 milligrams just because I don't want to experience a death experience, but this time I didn't really care. I wanted it to be extremely intense. And it's funny because when I'm away from the DMT experience and I get rusty or feel like I'm getting rusty, it's a lot harder for me to jump back into it. I find myself a lot more fearful when I try to jump back into the deep end of things. And it was really interesting that I took such a long break and then was able to jump into such a very intense experience. And the dose, I'm not quite sure what it was because I didn't have my scale, but it was anywhere from 50 to 60 milligrams. And I just put it in my bong just on a screen and used the lighter to basically vaporize the whole thing on the screen and made sure that I inhaled it all in one go. I always inhale it in one take. And when I inhaled it, I blew it out the window, and nothing immediately happened. I was able to blow it out the window and lie in my bed. The lights were off and everything. And then right when I hit my bed, I was expecting to see the usual patterning of some weird entity that usually greets me in the beginning. It's hard to explain it, but it's just some weird blocky patterned entity that kind of looks ancient. But this time I didn't really see that. I immediately just kind of went into some sort of room, and I called it some sort of like divine waiting room. The reason why I called it that is because, for one thing, it was very bright. It looked like it was made out of circles, just a whole bunch of circles, but these circles were kind of yin-yang type symbols. They were colored black and white, but I don't know if it was the yin-yang symbol, but it was some sort of symbol or something, and it was all just made up of these symbols, and it was a room basically with a few hallways in the back. But what was really bizarre about this is there was this type of tone that I was hearing, and it was different from the carrier wave, because the carrier wave is a lot more more vibrant and intense, I think. The carrier wave usually goes like wow, 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 but this time it was just like a very it was almost like you're in a big hallway and there's just this constant tone of like, oh, kind of like that. It was a lot different than my experience before, or my experiences in the past. But what was very strange about this room was that it wasn't morphing into different things like my usual DMT trips. It was very static, and it was just this one room. But the experience was very intense for me because I could feel just... I felt as if I was in some sort of afterlife kind of thing, or this is the place that you would go to if you were to die, basically. And it's just some sort of waiting room of some sort. And that's how I can tell that the experience was intense, because it wasn't just I was seeing these visuals or whatever. I was actually in this room, and it was just this one room that didn't really move much. I mean, the yin-yang symbols that it was made out of were spinning, but that's about it. The whole room stayed static, and I was just like sitting there staring at this room. And it's cool though, because I was expecting to experience a lot of fear, but this time, I guess since I was in such a bad mental state in terms of experiencing a lot of pain and just wanting to have something to remedy that I went in and I was completely fearless of this place. I almost felt content being there, because and usually that's strange for me, because in such really intense experiences like that, usually I'm fighting for my life kind of, or I'm really scared and I just want it to be over. But this time I was just sitting there completely still, just like staring at this place that I was in. And I could feel myself stop breathing. I couldn't feel myself breathing anymore, so that's how I also know that it was an intense experience, because usually when that happens, it's a huge ego death experience, and I thought I wasn't breathing at all. I thought I was in some sort of afterlife waiting room of some sort. But I could see the hallways in the beyond section, like straight ahead of me. But I didn't really focus too much on the hallways. They weren't moving. Nothing was really moving except for the spinning yin-yang symbols. Everything was just static. And I could see somewhat of tube-like structures on the edges of my peripherals in the room. And after the experience was over, things started to morph into symbols and more tube structures. But that room just, it at least made me feel calm, I think. It made me feel for that one moment that I was less, I guess, burdened by what I was experiencing. And that obviously didn't last. I mean, once I came out of the experience, I still feel the exact same burden and the exact same stress. And I pretty much know by now that I'm not really going to be freed from my emotional states and other things just from having tripping experiences. And I'll get into why I believe that is, and it's based on things that I've read recently that basically make that claim that you're never going to be able to free yourself from certain types of suffering when you're trying to reach out of your body, because the suffering is experienced inside your body. So but I'm going to talk about that more in the next video. But that's basically been my experience. I've been able to really gain a new perspective on life from these experiences, and that's definitely benefited me. But if I'm experiencing something that is emotionally very traumatizing and very difficult to deal with, for me, I don't believe that me having psychedelic experiences is just going to free me from that suffering or difficulty. But it's definitely going to make my perspective stronger on it. So I believe that at least is a positive thing. But this experience didn't really have any entity contact. There was nothing, which is strange. Usually I'm full of entity contact, but this time there was just this wall, or just this waiting room. And even though there wasn't much to it, I mean, it was incredibly beautiful what I was seeing, because I actually wanted to try to draw it or try to recreate what I was seeing, because it was definitely very complex, but it was also very simple. It was that dichotomy where you see something that's very simple but very complex at the same time, because even though it was just made out of these yin-yang white symbols, they were all turning in unison, I think, and it created this whole room, and the room just stayed still. It didn't move, it didn't morph, it just was just this room, and it felt more like a real experience just because it didn't morph into a bunch of things, and it didn't seem dreamlike. It felt more as if I was in a new place. And yeah, that's been my break from, or that's been my resuming of the DMT experience. After that experience, I actually wanted to go back in, because I thought it was really fascinating that I was able to actually endure it very easily, because usually intense experiences like that are just so scary to me. But I guess I've been in such a bad state that I'm a lot more daring, I think, and a lot more able to endure difficult experiences. I mean, to the point where what should have been difficult wasn't difficult at all for me. It was so easy. I think it's because what I'm dealing with right now is so difficult that by comparison, it was nothing for me. But yeah, I might go back in just to see what more I can experience, and I might as well make use of the fact that I'm in a state where I don't feel as much fear anymore. But yeah, that's about it. I'm definitely going to talk about the other thing that I was mentioning in my next video. And also, I just finished a tattoo design. I'm trying to build my tattoo portfolio to try to look for apprenticeships. So I'll show you the Japanese style tattoo design that I made. And that's about it. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.